Hello and welcome to the Commander's Quarters, your Magic the Gathering source that helps you command your budget. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all their support. There's even a brand new Brigadier General tier where you can get a shout out on a Commander's Quarters episode that's dedicated to you. Hey everyone, Mitch coming in for the Commander's Quarters studio. Welcome to the show. So today's episode comes to you courtesy of Jordan, who's been supporting this channel as a General tier patron. I truly couldn't do this without the support from amazing patrons like Jordan, so again, Jordan, thank you so much. And with the personalized deck tech, Jordan chose Elenda the Dusk Rose, wanting to overwhelm and annoy friends as much as possible with tokens. Elenda is a 1/1 Vampire Knight with lifelink that costs 2 white-black. She has, whenever another creature dies, put a +1 counter on Elenda the Dusk Rose. And when Elenda dies, create X 1/1 white vampire creature tokens with lifelink, where X is Elenda's power. So Elenda might start off small, but she can become massive in absolutely no time. Again, when any creature dies, doesn't matter if it's yours or your opponent's, she grows, getting more and more counters. Obviously, you can gain a ton of life with this commander because, well, when she's a massive creature, just swinging and utilizing that lifelink to gain a bunch of life, well, that's pretty nice. But what's really nice is that death trigger. When she dies, you get a massive number of vampire tokens, with lifelink as well. And again, keep in mind, there was that rule change when it came to commander death triggers that happened I believe it was last year at some point. And yeah, so now the death trigger actually works as you would think it would work. You can still put her in the command zone and get that death trigger when she dies. Or, and we'll talk about this here in a bit, there are ways to use and abuse this where you don't even have to put her in the command zone. So, take out creatures, grow Elenda throughout the game, and make a massive amount of tokens? Yeah, sounds like a plan to me. And really quick, though the commander is quite expensive, this deck is still pretty budget friendly because every single card in this deck outside of the commander is less than $1. And now with all that said, let's jump into it. So to start things off, let's talk about some ways to grow our commander with cards like Zot's Will, Dance Macabre, and Infernal Offering. Zot's Will says choose one, but if you control a commander as you cast this spell, you can choose both. Each opponent sacrifice a creature they control with the greatest power and exile all cards from all opponents' graveyards and create X01 black throw creature tokens for X the greatest power among creature cards exiled this way. Basically, hey, take out, 3 creatures, which is gonna grow our commander, and you know what, just make a massive amount of tokens as well. And then Dance Macabre says each player sacrifice a non-token creature, roll a d20 at the toughness of the creature you sacrifice this way. So if Elenda is big enough, well, we can essentially guarantee that we're going to hit this or make it incredibly likely. Regardless, if we somehow still hit a 1 to 14, it still works out fine. We return a creature card put into a graveyard this way to the battlefield under our control, which, yep, would be Elenda. And if we hit that 15 plus, which again can be very likely with this deck and with this commander, we're getting 2 of those creatures. Next up, Infernal Offering says choose an opponent. You and that player each sacrifice a creature. Each player who sacrifices a creature this way draws 2 cards. And choose an opponent, return a creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield, then that player returns a creature card from their graveyard to the battlefield. So sacrifice Elenda, draw some cards, get her back. Yeah, what's not to like? Again, we essentially can just make a massive army out of nowhere and set ourselves up to make another massive army with her in play again. So we can make our opponent sacrifice even more things with something like Siphon Flesh. It says each other player sacrifices a creature, you create a 2/2 black zombie creature token for each creature sacrificed this way. And of course, we can utilize all these creature tokens that we're going to be making for some creature fodder with things like Barter and Blood and Necrotic Hex. Barter and Blood says each player sacrifices 2 creatures, and Necrotic Hex makes everyone sacrifice 6, and we get 6 tap 2/2 black zombie creature tokens. And actually, keep in mind that sacrificing Elenda is not always a bad thing, and in fact, we've got plenty of ways in this deck to actually ensure that we can sacrifice her when we want to, but yeah, other times, just sacrifice your other tokens and grow Elenda even more. Of course, we can also utilize some wraths that can really help us out, like Divine Reckoning, Promise of Loyalty, and Slash the Ranks. Divine Reckoning says each player chooses a creature they control, destroy the rest, and it's got flashback for 5 white. And then Promise of Loyalty is very similar. It says each player puts a vow counter on a creature they control and sacrifices the rest. Each of those creatures can't attack you or planeswalkers you control for as long as it has a vow counter on it. And then Slash the Rank says throw out creatures and planeswalkers except for commanders. Essentially, these are all board wipes that get rid of basically everything, but Elenda is going to be sticking around. Speaking of which, there's Tragic Arrogance, which says for each player you choose from among the permanents that player controls an artifact, a creature, an enchantment, and a planeswalker, then each player sacrifices all of their non-land permanents they control. So we can wipe out a ton of things, making the best decisions for us and the worst decisions for our opponents. So yeah, control the board, wipe out your opponent's creatures, and grow your commander to make more creatures of your own. Now, as good as all these cards are, there's still one, in my opinion, that stands above the rest, and that's going to be the Golden Pig of this deck, which is the number 1 card out of our 99. And the Golden Pig for this deck is Butcher of Malakir. Butcher of Malakir is a 5/4 vampire warrior with flying that costs 5 black. It has, whenever it or another creature you control dies, each opponent sacrifices a creature. Yeah, our opponent's creatures aren't going to be long for this world, because again, this deck is fantastic at making a ton of tokens. And now, whenever any of those tokens or any of our other creatures die, our opponents each have to sacrifice a creature of their own. And again, when they do that, our commander grows, which again is going to make us even more tokens next time. You see where this is going. In combination with other cards in this deck, Butcher of Malakir can be a devastating way to control the board and to pump our commander, and well, it is an incredible engine once it gets going, and that's what makes it the Golden Pig. Regardless, of course, we've got plenty of other ways to control the board outside of just dealing with, pretty much every creature, with cards like Despark, Utter End, Fracture, Forsake the Worldly, Return to Dust, and Crush Contraband to help us deal with things like pesky artifacts and enchantments. And actually, just while I'm going through giant lists of cards, here's some more with the ramp for this deck with cards like Everflowing Chalice, Ebony Fly, Mindstone, Orzhov Obsidian, Marble Diamond, Charcoal Diamond, Guardian Idol, Liquid Metal Torque, Fractured Power Stone, and Prismatic Lens. I ran out of breath for a little bit right there. Thanks for bearing with me. But now let's move on and talk about how we can really get things going in this deck. And that would be to utilize the power of repeatable sacrifice outlets with cards like Viscera Seer, Dimir Houseguard, and Chittering Witch. Viscera Seer is a fantastic free sacrifice outlet, letting us sacrifice a creature to scry 1. So yeah, in combination with, say, our Golden Pig, we can sacrifice our own creatures to basically wipe our opponent's boards whenever we want to. And of course, more importantly with our commander, we can sacrifice our commander whenever we need to just generate a massive army. And then Dimir Houseguard is a sacrifice outlet that is free, and also one that can protect itself because when we sacrifice a creature, we regenerate it. And it's also a very flexible card, being a tutor for any card in our deck that has a converted mana cost of 4, since it has transmute for 1 black. Moving on, then we've got Chittering Witch, which can make us a bunch of rat tokens, 1 for each opponent that we have, and then by paying 1 and a black, we sacrifice a creature until our creature gets -2/-2 until end of turn. So yeah, she can make us some fantastic creature fodder and also be a sacrifice outlet for us that can help us take out other creatures. And sacrifice outlets like these can be even more impactful when we combine them with cards like these. Cards like Supernatural Stamina, Undying Evil, Graceful Reprieve, Demonic Gifts, Abnormal Endurance, Undying Malice, and Feigned Death are incredible in this deck. Now, each of them kind of goes about it in a somewhat different way, but basically the gist is this. They are instants that essentially say when target creature dies this turn, well, they just come back. So because of that, we can still get Elenda's death trigger without adding to that commander tax and just making her harder and harder to cast. It's kind of like a get out of jail free card, which again we can just utilize to use and abuse Elenda's trigger. So if we've got Elenda out and she's got a ton of power, and we've got a free sacrifice outlet in play, we can just cast one of these, target Elenda, sacrifice Elenda, and get a ton of tokens. Again, doing this before our turn can be a big surprise to our opponents. And also, yeah, just in general, these can be great cards to protect our key creatures, like, our commander, but also, like Butcher of Malakir. If someone tries to deal with it, we go, no. Regardless, when we do want to sacrifice our commander, we can actually get even more value out of it with cards like Ultra's Reap, Costly Plunder, and Village Rites, which draws cards when we do so, and we've got some more standard draw spells like Promise of Power, Blood Pact, Read the Bones, and Sign in Blood. On top of that, we can draw a ton of cards with Disciple of Bolas, which has, when she enters the battlefield, sacrifice another creature, you gain X life and draw X cards where X is that creature's power. And then Mask of Grizzlebrand can be a repeatable source of card advantage. It has equipped creature has flying and lifelink, so it can, not double up on the lifelink with our commander, but also give flying to help our commander get through. It says whenever equipped creature dies, you may pay X life or X its power. If you do, draw X cards. Again, we can gain a ton of life thanks to our commander, so that's no big deal. 1 life for each card, not a big deal at all, but we can draw a ton of cards when we sacrifice her, so yeah, have fun with that. And of course, we can just draw cards consistently throughout the game with something like Smothering Abomination. It has at the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice a creature. Whenever you sacrifice a creature, draw a card. Or at least I should say, again, consistently throughout the game, just with that upkeep trigger, but more so just kind of in giant chunks when we decide to sacrifice a ton of creatures, at once. But next up, let's talk about some of our other sacrifice outlets with cards like Culling Dais, Vampiric Rites, and Hidden Stockpile. With Culling Dais, we can tap it to sacrifice a creature to get a charge counter on it, and then we can pay 1 to sacrifice it and draw a card for each charge counter that's on it. Vampiric Rites has pay 1 in black, sacrifice a creature, you gain 1 life and draw a card. And Hidden Stockpile has Revolt at the beginning of your end step. If a permanent you control left the battlefield this turn, you get a 1/1 servo. Oh, and you can also pay 1 to sacrifice a creature to scry 1. So yeah, basically replace the creature that you sacrificed and scry while you're doing so. Next up, we've got Etchings of the Chosen, Martyr's Cause, and Pious Evangel. Etchings of the Chosen is a fantastic vampire anthem for us. When it comes into play, we just choose vampires and they all get +1/+1. On top of that, by paying 1, we can sacrifice a creature of the chosen type, and the target creature we control gains indestructible until end of turn. So this card can not only pump our team, but we can also use it to sacrifice our commander for that death trigger, and we can also use it to sacrifice creatures to protect our commander. This card is incredible in this deck. And then Martyr's Cause has sacrifice a creature to prevent all damage to a creature or player from one source. So again, with a ton of creature fodder, we can protect ourselves from some really big things, and yeah, again, a free sacrifice outlet is never a bad thing in a deck like this. Especially in combination with a card like Pious Evangel, or, well, we'll get to it here in a second. Because Pious Evangel has whenever any other creature enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 1 life, so there's a ton of life gain potential from, again, all of our creature tokens entering the battlefield. But perhaps more importantly, by paying 2 and tapping it, we sacrifice another permanent to transform Pious Evangel. And it transforms into Wayward Disciple, which says whenever it or other creature you control dies, target opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So now by making all those vampire tokens, we can drain our opponents out really quickly with this. Speaking of which, we're also going to be utilizing cards like Corpse Knight, Falconwrath Noble, and Vindictive Vampire. Corpse Knight says whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, each opponent loses 1 life. So again, by sacrificing Elenda and just making a ton of vampires, we can drain our opponents out really quickly. Or when those vampires die, Falconwrath Noble and Vindictive Vampire can also help out. Falconwrath Noble says whenever it and another creature dies, target player loses 1 life and you gain 1 life, and Vindictive Vampire says whenever another creature you control dies, Vindictive Vampire deals 1 damage to each opponent and you gain 1 life. Again, with the number of tokens that we can make and how easily we can sacrifice them, our opponents aren't going to last very long. And we can take them out even quicker with Felissa in play. Felissa has, whenever a non-token creature you control dies, if it had counters on it, create X tapped 2/1 white and black Inkling creature tokens with flying, where X the number of counters it had on it. So with this in play, we basically double up the number of creature tokens that we make when Elenda dies. Okay, it's not exactly double, but it's close. And actually that gap would be slightly further if we were utilizing a card like Blackblade Reforged. It's going to give Elenda +1/+1 for each land we control, and because she's legendary, it only costs 3 to equip. Again, Elenda's death trigger counts her power, not the number of counters on her, so keep that in mind. And since we can make Elenda deadlier, how about we make the tokens deadlier as well with Intangible Virtue? It's going to give creature tokens we control +1/+1 and Vigilance, which also pairs quite nicely if we decide to just, maybe win with Decree of Justice. It has cycling for 2 and a white, and when we cycle it, we can pay X, and if we do, we get X 1/1 white soldier creature tokens. Oh, and if we want to hardcast it, we can, get X 4/4 angels, if we really feel like that. Regardless, this can be great ways to just, get out a ton of creatures for sacrifice fodder or extra value, or again, just winning with, Intangible Virtue or something like that. But we can also pump and protect our team with cards like Make a Stand and Unbreakable Formation. Make a Stand's going to give creatures we control +1/+0 and indestructible until end of turn, and Unbreakable Formation also makes them indestructible, and if we cast it during our main phase, we get a counter on each of our creatures, and they get Vigilance until end of turn. And of course, we can also utilize Rootborn Defenses to protect our team and to populate as well. But now that we've gone through every single non-land card in this deck, let's talk about the price. Like I mentioned at the start of this episode, every single card in this deck outside of the commander is less than $1. So even though Elenda is an over $20 card, the estimated price of this deck is still just $54.71. And yeah, if she was quite cheaper, then this deck would be a lot more budget friendly than it already is. But yeah, this cost actually even includes the cost of basic lands as well, so if you already have those, there's some extra savings there for you. And speaking of extra savings, if you buy this deck on TCG Player, you can utilize some heavily played and damaged cards to maybe even save even more. Though do keep in mind that this estimated cost does not include the cost of shipping, which might vary depending upon where you live. And with that, the show is coming to a close, so it's my turn to hear from you. So the comments below, let me know your thoughts on this episode are, and as always, thanks again and have a good one.